Hey, good morning, everybody. We're going to get started here, so I want to thank everyone for coming. I just want to give you a quick sneak preview of what the presentation is not going to be about today. So without further ado, we'll move on to the subject matter that's here. So I am a certified security practitioner. I happen to be a systems engineer working for Bit9 Carbon Black, and the content of the discussion today is geared toward endpoint threat detection, response, and prevention. So we're going to talk about the new world, the new realities, and how the increase in targeted attacks has had a direct impact on security for the endpoints. So when we start talking about traditional security, we start talking about the security life cycle. So most of the legacy endpoint security products that are out there today fall into a category which is defined as EPP, or endpoint protection platform. So those are the technologies which are the typical suspects. It's some version of DLP, it's HIPS, it's HIDS, it's signature-based antivirus. And what's happening out there in the marketplace right now is Gartner is defining a new endpoint market, which is actually referred to as endpoint threat detection, response, and prevention. Whereas EPP is specifically targeted toward preventing bad things running based upon signatures, what ETDR market is all about. It's all about increasing the endpoint security posture from just a preventive technology to actually looking at visibility response as well as detection, and how that is going to have an impact on protecting your endpoints that are out there. So when we start looking at that endpoint threat detection, response, and prevention market, it's actually divided into two different categories with two different focuses. So the first part of what ETDR technologies are designed to do is actually reducing the attack surface. So when we look at technologies that fall into that upper portion, we're actually looking at most of the products which are actually classified as security controls. Those security controls are typically based upon application whitelisting or application sandboxing. And then when we get down into the lower portion of what that market is designed to do, it's actually reducing the amount of time it's going to take for you to actually react to or mitigate any type of a breach or a compromise that would happen. So the combination of both targeting to reduce the attack surface as well as decrease the amount of time it takes to react to these attacks is actually what ETDR is designed to do. So obviously this is not something new to anybody. We all realize that technology is involved, and directly what that's doing, it's actually increasing the attack surface. It used to be that most users were kind of tied to the hardware and the business applications that were provisioned to them by their corporate IT staff. But with the increase in the expansion of bring your own device and the new rate at which endpoint devices and networking advances are happening, it's getting harder and harder for corporate IT folks to actually protect those endpoints. And it seems traditionally that the majority of IT budget has been spent on the perimeter defense. Those are the ones that the budget dollars that are going toward more advanced firewalls for network-based malware detection systems. But we all know that it's the phishing attacks, it's the end user that is actually targeted as that entry point into any organization, and they're going to use and exploit those users to get to the corporate intellectual property, and that's actually where the breaches and the compromise are going to occur. So much like this is pretty much a recurring theme that's been out there in the industry over time. So there's different threat actors that are out there, and they each are targeting a specific end user community. The takeaway from this slide is that the names and the actions haven't changed over time, but what we're actually seeing out there in the marketplace is that some of the advanced techniques that have been used by, or let's say isolated to hacktivists in the past, are now being adopted, and they're actually being used by either criminal enterprise hacktivists or even national states. And there's also been a trend out there in the community where some of the older strands of targeted attacks are actually being resurrected and brought back into play that we hadn't seen over the course of a couple years or so. The key takeaway with this slide, and what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get through this information as quickly as possible. There's a lot of information here. I'm trying to streamline it for the 30-minute time slot that we have here. Again, the key takeaway from this slide is that detection or visibility is the key to actually helping to reduce some of these advanced threats that are coming into your organization. We know that 66%, and these are actual statistics, and the sources of this information is listed down there in the bottom, but 66% of malware took months or even years to actually be identified within organizations. A large percentage of those breaches or those compromises are actually identified by people outside of the company or the organization. This would be a person or an individual that has seen some type of erroneous charge on their credit card. So maybe that person has reported to his or her financial organization calls the retailer. The third statistic is staggering, that there's actually approximately 155,000 of new malware that's out there and detected on a daily basis. And the most interesting part about it is that traditional or historical EPP products are actually only probably at best coming up with signatures for maybe a third of the malware that's detected out there on a daily basis. So it's at 2/3 of first seen malware, as well as those targeted attack or those advanced targeted attacks that are actually taking control of the organization. And then there's an estimate there from Verizon as well that talks about what the actual cost, both the hard cost and the soft cost of combating a breach would cost a company. So this is, again, compromise happens in seconds once they get in, whether the dropper file's sitting there waiting to take control. But in addition to it happening in seconds, it can actually start exfiltrating data in a matter of minutes. And then again, based upon the lack of visibility into the endpoints and the actual being reactive or being proactive with the detection of any type of unusual events in there, it can even take months to actually uncover the fact that you've been compromising that data, intellectual property, or regulatory information has been leaving your organization and putting your organization at breach. So when we start talking about the different type of attacks that are out there, we have the traditional or the opportunistic attackers or the hacktivists that are out there. And what's actually happening with the two different type of attacks that are out there, with the opportunistic attack, what they're actually doing is targeting a large number of endpoints that they're trying to exfiltrate to get some type of monetary reward out of. So as the number of machines that are being compromised goes up, the likelihood of your company actually knowing that there's a signature out there increases, because these are actually volume-based attacks where the ultimate goal is to get out there and attack as many computers as possible. When we start talking about the trend that's out there in the industry today, where we start talking about some of the advanced persistent threats, the ultimate goal of those hackers is to target a finite group. They're targeting data versus going for volume of machines and getting some type of monetary incentive from a larger volume of machines versus specific information or intellectual property. So when we start talking about the whole mindset of us as security professionals needs to change in order to be effective against some of these newer advanced threats out there. So what I like to say is that our entire attitude or our entire approach to securing our organizations, our endpoints, has to change. So it's no longer a matter of if we're going to be compromised. It's a matter of when we're going to get compromised. So you should be going into work every day, or even with your home computer, right? right? That you should assume that you're going to be breached or compromised, and that's obviously inevitable. But most importantly is, how am I going to figure out that I'm under attack, and what am I going to be able to do to either eliminate the attack or minimize the damage that happens as that attack? So in addition to changing your attitude, this is basically all about applying common sense to your security approach, right? So when we start talking about some of the traditional security tools that are out there, EPP, for example, most of the EPP products are reactionary products, right? So they're depending upon signatures to be out there. So what we really need to do is we need to shift our mindset from going from a reactionary perspective to being more proactive and trying to adopt security controls that will give us more visibility and alerting up front that in fact we are under some type of an attack that is out there. And then you also have to realize that security is not an event; it's a process. It's a process that needs to be started at the top within your organization. I mean. Compromise and breach used to be something that was pretty much isolated or limited to the people within the organization that were focused on IT security. Now, your average person, whether or not they're working in IT or not, is well aware of the compromises that are happening out there. I mean, you've got the Targets, the Home Depots. I mean, this week it was Sears and Kmart had announced that there was a compromise. So yesterday we took the day off, right? No company announced that they were breached, but we had the Poodle outbreak, right? So there was another new strand of advanced targeted attack that was out there as well. So when Gartner starts talking about this new market, or this ETDR market that we're talking about, the Endpoint Threat Detection, Response, and Prevention, what they actually refer to this as the adaptive security architecture. So what you can actually look at is those 5 different categories that are out there and how it relates to an attack that would actually be happening within your environment or your organization. So we see that depending upon the technology and the type of control that you would be looking at. So initially up front we talked about the 2 different type of endpoint security tools that are part of this ETDR market. We've got the first one was the security control that is typically based upon either application whitelisting or application sandboxing, and then we have the real-time incident response tools that are out there. And what this chart here kind of describes is where those tools are most effective, whether it's in the pre-attack or the prevention type of thwarting or eliminating or minimizing some attack, or whether it's a tool that can be effectively used during the attack, or even used as a post-attack to actually increase your defenses and minimize additional attacks to occur in the past. These are some of the suggested capabilities or ways that your company can adopt different internal processes or procedures to make you effective in the various different parts that are defined as part of the adaptive security architecture. And this is you know, a chart or a graphic that everybody's pretty familiar with. This is a Lockheed Martin kill chain, and this kind of talks about where the new technologies within this ETDR space, the Endpoint Threat Detection, Response, and Prevention space, fall into and are related to the kill chain. And we can see that when we start talking about some of the legacy or the traditional solutions that are out there which are focused on preventive, you're really only covering a small percentage of the kill chain, wherein by introducing and adopting some of the newer technologies, you're actually able to expand your coverage and get more increased security posture to helpfully eliminate or control the amount of damage that would be happening out there. So when we start talking about the characteristics of these 2 technologies combined, these are the 5 areas that are typically associated with it. So visibility. I like to think of visibility with these new ETDR products as, you know, a way to collect events that are happening out there on the endpoint. And depending upon the type of device you're actually running these controls upon, you can either treat those devices as fixed function devices where nothing can actually be allowed to run on those endpoints unless it's pre-approved, or you can just be to the point where you're actually collecting and gathering and consolidating all that information and looking for patterns of compromise and breach that would be out there. Now we're going to talk about detection, response, and prevention. And then part of that new emerging market is also what Gartner refers to as the next generation network-based malware detection system. So these are the Palo Alto networks, the checkpoints, the Fidelis, the FireEyes that are actually running at the egress point, and as packets are coming into your organization, what they're routing those packets over to either an emulation or a detonation environment. They're actually looking at those packets to determine whether or not they are any suspicious or malicious type of packet. If in fact it's determined that it would happen to be a crypto lock or some other type of advanced threat, what it will actually do is send the hash of those files over to one of these new ETDR tools, and then the ETDR tool has the capability of actually blocking or preventing those things from executing. So much like we were talking about where security is not an event, it's a process, the tools that are available out there today really need to be complementing each other, or you need to be actually merging your network defenses in conjunction with your endpoint devices that are out there. So from an expediency sake, we're going to kind of look at each one of the different components of that, the attack surface, reducing the attack surface. So when we start talking about the prevention capability, part of the challenges that we have with the traditional security from a prevention capability are the traditional signature-based security tools. So we know that I'd be willing to bet that probably 100% of you are still running some derivative of antivirus on all your endpoints out there. And antivirus definitely still has its value in a defense in depth model. But the ability of it to actually stop and thwart some of these advanced attacks that are out there anymore, and the sheer volume, it just can't keep up its DAT file or the signature file on a daily basis, and that's where a lot of the risk comes into play. And then in addition to that, most traditional signature-based products are actually being ran or administered in some type of a scanning mode because of the overhead that those security controls typically take up. So again, in between the scan where you're actually looking for any type of compromise that occurred, that's that window of risk. So if the endpoint security control isn't out there and it's not actually monitoring and collecting those events in real-time mode, you've got a bigger window of risk for some type of an attack to actually compromise your endpoints. So when we start talking about some of the newer emerging endpoint solutions, the two of the key things are the fact that it's happening in real time. There's no scanning associated, and as opposed to being based upon signatures, these new technologies are actually based upon policy. So you can easily go in there and you can easily configure or define the type of software or the type of business applications that should be allowed to run within your environment. And again, depending upon whether or not you have the security posture of that policy either ratcheted up or ratcheted down, you can treat that device as a fixed function device. So for example, a ton of customers that are running XP that didn't want to pay Microsoft the premium for the extended support on that, they've looked at some of these newer ETDR tools as an alternative to taking on extended maintenance. They're putting a high enforcement policy out there on the endpoints. The endpoints are actually seen as fixed function devices, and then nothing can be allowed to install or ran on those machines unless it's being pre-approved. So by virtue of the fact that you can ratchet up the security, you're reducing that attack surface, because unless it's a pre-approved application or file, it's not going to be allowed to run on the endpoint. When we start talking about the detection that's out there, again, the detection is being able to actually observe and see that compromise or that attack happening when it is actually happening. So a lot of the traditional detection tools that are out there, especially when we start talking about incident response tools, a lot of those tools are actually brought in after the compromise has occurred. So you've got, pick any company, any organization out there that's had some type of a compromise, and of course we all know that the IT organization is running lean and mean as it is. So when a compromise occurs to any sizable extent or magnitude, a lot of IT organizations are actually bringing in either representatives from that company or other service staffs to offset an IR investigation. And these can be very labor intensive, they can be very expensive. And part of the challenge is that the traditional IR tools that are out there are actually trying to go in and recreate the compromise. They're a reactive incident response tool. So what they're doing, they're taking the machines that have been compromised, they're taking them off network, they're scouring through the various event logs on the machines, they're trying to figure out what has exactly happened, how the attack occurred, what machines it was affected. They're looking for IP addresses of either the source or the call out, the call back, call and command from those machines. So the newer IR tools that are out there are, again, being much more proactive. So as opposed to waiting for a compromise to occur, what's actually happening, these newer tools are actually collecting the key data elements that are used in an IR investigation if and when a compromise occurred. And part of the advantage that you actually get, because you're actually collecting those data elements as the breach or the compromise is occurring, you can actually be running or detecting the patterns or the behavior of those events that are happening. And you can actually be measuring those up against global threat intelligence feeds where you're actually running indicators of compromise. So by virtue of the fact that you're collecting the information as the activity is happening, you're measuring them against known threat intelligence feeds, that gives you the upper hand to potentially stop or reduce the amount of time. And then again, as we saw on that Lockheed Martin kill chain, by virtue of the fact that you're expanding your protection on multiple steps of that kill chain, it's also going to be used to your advantage. And then lastly, what we're going to talk about is the response here. So again, some of the things that increase the amount of time that it takes to remediate or figure out what happened. You're going in, you're doing in-depth analysis. I believe it was, there was a study that showed that your average machine that's been compromised, it takes an average of at least 25 hours for an IR investigation to thoroughly investigate any single machine. So when you start doing the math, when you're talking about 25 hours per machine, and that's if you're actually going in doing the thorough investigation versus just re-imaging the machine and putting it back out there. Because if the compromise has already happened, you have to figure out how it had happened, and you want ultimately to stop that or to prevent it from reoccurring. So when you start talking about even a small number of machines, that might be 100 machines, when you're talking about 25 hours per machine, and you start doing the math of multiplying that by 100 machines, it's obviously that this is going to take weeks, if not months, of man hours to actually remediate or investigate a simple attack or compromise that may have occurred. So bottom line, there's really not enough intelligence out there that's available to all of us to help us protect our corporate assets. So what you really need to do, or in addition to rethinking your security attitude and using more common sense, you have to realize that the endpoints are the most vulnerable part of any organization, and that's actually where the targeted attacks are actually happening. You need to be using your endpoint, newer endpoint technologies in conjunction with some of the newer network-based malware detection systems to give you a truly defense in depth from a knowledgeable and visibility perspective of what's happening in your organization. And again, regardless of the vertical markets that have been attacked, we can all learn from other attacks that are happening out there. We can learn about the hacktivists, what methods that they're using. So let's say, the next retailer of the week gets compromised. It's not unusual to think that a healthcare organization can also leverage the information of that attack, because some of the global intelligence feeds are going to even have things as simple as the IP addresses where those attacks have originated, domains especially. And then just in summary, threat landscape continues to evolve. The threats are more targeted, they're more advanced. We need to be able to rethink our security posture. And you need to go on a daily basis with the assumption that you will be compromised. And prevention is no longer enough. We need to have visibility detection and in addition to prevention. So with that, I'd like to thank everybody for attending. I think we have a couple minutes for questions if anybody has one. Okay. All right, thanks.